Livewire's cable types, ratings, and termination. This tutorial covers the types of cables and wires you will use at Livewire. It also covers cable ratings and how to properly terminate cables and add connectors. Let's start by looking at the different types of cables you will see while working at Livewire. We've divided the types of cables into 4 different categories: structured cable wires, speaker wires, security wires, and specialty wires. At Livewire, the types of structured cable wires you'll use are twisted pair cabling, which includes Cat5, Cat5e, and Cat6 cables, RJ45 coax cable, and multimedia cable. Let's take a look at each type of structured cable wire. The first type of structured cable wire we mentioned was twisted pair cabling. Twisted pair cabling is most often used for computer networks or data and telephone wiring or voice. It also can be used for video. At Livewire, you will use Cat5, Cat5e, the E stands for enhance, and Cat6. Cat5 cable supports a maximum Ethernet speed of 100 megabits per second. Cat5e cable supports up to 1 gigabit per second, which is equivalent to 1,000 megabits per second. Cat6 cable supports gigabit Ethernet speeds as well and is ready for the new 10 gigabit over Ethernet standard when it's released in the future. Twisted pair cabling is made up of 4 pairs of twisted conductors, giving it a total of 8 conductors. It has orange and white orange, green and white green, blue and white blue, and brown and white brown. We'll talk more about twisted pair cabling towards the end of this tutorial when you learn how to terminate it and add on a connector. The second type of structured cable wire we mentioned was the RJ45 coax cable. This cable is primarily used to distribute cable television signals. It consists of a copper-clad steel center conductor with aluminum foil or aluminum shield braid. We'll learn how to terminate an RJ45 coax cable and crimp on the connector later in this tutorial. The third and final type of structured cable wire you will use at Livewire is a multimedia cable. The multimedia cable is used to run voice, data, and cable into one room. It consists of 2 twisted pair cables, usually Cat5e, and 2 RJ45 coax cables. The benefit of using a multimedia cable is that it saves time and effort. Instead of having to run 4 separate wires, you can run this one wire and get the same result. Another type of cable you will see at Livewire will be speaker wire. Speaker wires are labeled with their gauge and the number of conductors they have. At Livewire, you'll most likely use either 12-4, 16-2, or 16-4 speaker wire. The thickness of a wire's conductive copper bundle is identified as its gauge. The lower the gauge, the thicker the wire, and the better its capacity to pass the amplified signal. 12-4 wire can connect 2 speakers using the red-black for one and the white-green for the other. A 16-2 wire can only connect 1 speaker using the red-black wires. A 16-4 wire can connect 2 speakers using the red-black for one speaker and the white-green for the other. In addition to structured cable wires and speaker wires, you will also use security wires while working at Livewire. These wires are used to connect the various components of a security system within a house or building. The security wires are also labeled with the gauge wire and the number of conductors. There are 4 types of security wires you will use at Livewire. The 18-2 wire is most often used for connecting a siren. The 18-4 wire is most often used for connecting a smoke detector. The 22-2 wire is used on door and window contacts, and the 22-4 wire is mostly used with motion detectors and glass breaks. The final category of cable types you will see at Livewire are specialty wires. Sometimes home automated systems may require special control wiring. For example, the Lutron Savoia cable is used for light and shade control, and the Crestron Crestnet cable is used for Crestron control and automation systems. Now that we have taken a look at the types of cables you will see at Livewire, let's talk about how cables are rated. Interior cables have designated flame ratings to prevent the spread of fire and smoke in commercial and residential buildings. There are 3 ratings you will see and need to be familiar with at Livewire. A cable can be plenum rated, riser rated, or general purpose rated. Plenum rated cables have the highest rating and general purpose has the lowest rating. The cable rating is important because based on the building type and the locations of where the wires must run, you must adhere to certain rating standards. Each type of cable we mentioned earlier will have a rating. For example, an 18.4 security wire could have a plenum rating, a riser rating, or a general purpose rating. Let's take a look at each rating category. Plenum rated cables. A plenum, by definition, is a compartment or chamber to which one or more air ducts are connected and forms part of the air distribution center. Plenum-rated cables are cables approved for running through the air distribution system or HVAC system. Plenum requirements apply to commercial and multifamily residential buildings with 3 or more families. Plenum-rated cables have the highest flame rating. Therefore, plenum-rated cables could substitute for general-purpose or riser-rated cables, but not the other way around. Riser-rated cables. Cables that need to be run between floors in non-plenum areas are riser-rated cables. For example, a cable traveling through an elevator shaft would require a riser-rated cable. Riser-rated cables have a lower flame rating than plenum-rated cables, but a higher fire rating than general-purpose rated cable. Therefore, a riser-rated cable could substitute for a general-purpose rated cable, but not the other way around. General-purpose rated cables. General-purpose rated cables may be used within walls on a single building level or when concealed in conduit. For residential buildings, fewer than 3 families, only general-purpose rated cables are required. There is another rating that you might see on a cable that isn't a flame rating. Cables that are buried outside underground must either be surrounded by conduit or be an exterior rated cable, also known as direct burial or flooded cable. Direct burial cable is approved for burial in a trench without the use of conduit. The wires within the cables are encased in a thermoplastic sheath that seals out moisture. It is also flooded with silicone, further protecting the cables from moisture. Now that we've looked at how cables are rated and the types of cables you will see at Livewire, let's learn how to terminate some of these cables and add connectors. The following video tutorials will demonstrate how to terminate many of the cables we just covered. You'll also learn how to use many of the tools we touched upon in the previous tutorial. Let's start by learning how to terminate a Cat5 cable with an RJ45 connector. Remember, the Cat5 cable is one of the twisted pair cables and is most often used for data and voice. The process you will learn here for Cat5 is similar for Cat5e and Cat6 cables. You'll start with the Cat5 cable. We first need to strip away the sheathing, being careful not to cut the twisted pair wires inside. To do this, you can use scissors, as you'll see here, or a razor knife. You'll want to very lightly score the sheathing around the Cat5, bend it back and forth so it breaks, and pull off the sheathing. This will expose the 4 twisted pairs we learned about earlier. You can trim off the string. The string is there to strengthen the wire and can also be used to cut more of the sheathing off by pulling down on it. However, for right now, you can just trim it off. In order to attach an RJ45 connector, you will need to untwist the wires. Everyone has his or her own method for doing this. You can just untwist the wire pairs by hand, or you can use the sheathing you cut off earlier, insert the edge of it between the twisted pairs, and twist down to unwind the wires. Once they are all untwisted, straighten them out as much as you can. Then, you need to put the wires in order. There are 2 standards by which you can order the wires. Standard A, which has the pattern white-green, green, white-orange, blue, white-blue, orange, white-brown, and brown. Or you can use Standard B, which just exchanges the white-orange and orange with the white-green and green. Both Standard A and Standard B work equally well. Just make sure to use the same standard on both ends of the cable. In this video, you will see that he is using Standard A to order the wires. So, he starts from left to right with white-green, then green, white-orange, blue, white-blue, orange, white-brown, and brown. Once you have them in the correct order, you can trim them to the appropriate length to fit into the connector. When you are attaching the RJ45 connector, you want to make sure the clip part of the connector is facing down. Before inserting the wires, always make sure the pattern stayed the same after you trim the wires. Once you know they are in the correct order, slip all of the wires into the pins in the connector, making sure they are in the correct order. Wiggle the wires into the pins. Make sure the sheeting is up underneath the pinch point. This is where the connector will get crimped. Also make sure all of the tips of the wires are all the way to the end of the connector, touching the end of the contacts. Check again to make sure the wires are in the correct order. Then, take your RJ45 crimpers, stick the wire in the crimpers, and squeeze. Make sure it is crimped on securely. Also make sure that the ends of the wires are all the way to the end of the connector. Check the pattern one more time. That's it! You're done terminating a Cat5 wire with an RJ45 connector. You'll also need to know how to attach the RJ45 Keystone connector to the Cat5 wire. The RJ45 Keystone connector is the part attached to the plate on the wall. The RJ45 connector that we just put on fits into the RJ45 Keystone connector. Since you will be running wires within walls and adding the plates on the walls, you will also need to know how to punch down a Cat5 wire with an RJ45 Keystone connector. Let's learn how to do that now. Again, score the sheeting around the Cat5 wire, making sure not to damage the wires inside. Take off the sheeting and trim the string. Now take the RJ45 Keystone connector. This is the part that goes into the plate on the wall. There are patterns on the sides that tell you the A and B standards. A is on top, B is on the bottom. Remember, the difference between A and B is basically just switching the orange and white orange with green and white green. The blue and brown wires stay the same no matter which standard you are using, A or B. Inside of this connector, there are 8 different punch-down slots, and the wires lay across these slots. Basically, the wires get knocked down and a little piece of metal pinches the wires and makes the connection. You can either untwist all the wires again, as we did for the RJ45 connector, or, as you will see in this video, you can just untwist enough of the wires to lay across the punch-down slots. Once you have all of the wires laying across the punch-down slots, you're ready for your punch-down tool. The punch-down tool has a blade on one side and a dull square edge on the other side. Lay the RJ45 Keystone connector down on the table. Above each slot, put the punch-down tool on top with the blade side facing the outer edge of the connector. The cutting tip will trim off the excess for each wire. Hold the connector with your other hand and push down with the punch-down tool in each slot. Once you finish one side, flip the tool around so the cutting part is going the other way and push down in each slot. Now that they have all been crimped, take the excess wire and pull them off. Just as with the RJ45 connector, make sure the Keystone connector is attached securely. Check the order of the wires one more time. That's it! Now your Keystone fitting is ready to snap into a wall plate. Now we're going to learn how to terminate an RG6 coax cable with an F connector and a Keystone F connector. Remember, the RG6 coax cable is mostly used for cable television. You will need a pair of coax strippers, as well as a coax compression tool. And of course, you need the RG6 coax cable. The coax strippers have two razor blades inside that score the sheathing. Put the coax cable inside the strippers and spin the strippers around 1 to 5 times. Then pull off the sheath of the cable. As we talked about earlier, within the cable is aluminum shielding. You will need to fray it out around the outside jacket. With quad shield coax, which is what Livewire mostly uses, there will be 2 layers of shielding. Fray out each layer of the shield, making sure not to leave any pieces that would eventually touch the center conductor or the dielectric, the foam piece around the conductor. Now, take the F connector. Push the F connector onto the end of the coax cable. Push it on until the center conductor is up through the hole, straight and centered. Also make sure the dielectric, the white foam part, is pushed up centered and level with the inside edge of the connector. Once you've done that, take your coax compression tool, open it up, lay the coax cable inside, and while holding the cable forward into the compression tool, squeeze down. Make sure the cable has been crimped on securely. Also make sure that the center conductor is still nice and straight and the dielectric is still centered and flush. Once you've properly crimped on the F connector, you can add a Keystone F connector. The Keystone F connector is the part that will snap into the wall plate. To do this, simply line up the center conductor with the hole in the Keystone F connector and twist on until it is nice and snug. Now it's ready to snap into a wall plate. Next, we're going to learn how to strip speaker wire and attach it to binding posts or screw terminals. We'll start with the speaker wire. For the purposes of this video, we are using 16-2 speaker wire. Remember, that means it's 16 gauge with 2 conductors. To strip off the sheathing, you can use scissors as we did in the other videos. You can use your wire cutters if you're comfortable with that, or you can use wire strippers. For this video, we'll use scissors again to score the sheathing. Pull off the sheathing. If you need to reveal more wire, you can use the string as we mentioned before. Once you have enough wire showing, trim the string and any excess sheathing. You can also trim the wires to the desired length. Now you must strip the sheathing from each speaker wire, the red and the black. To do this, it's best to use your wire strippers. Make sure you pick the correct gauge on the wire stripper. Since we are using 16 gauge wire, you will need to find the 16 gauge hole on the wire strippers. Crimp down and pull off the sheathing for each. It's good practice to twist the ends of the wires tight so there aren't any loose ends. If you have a speaker plate with binding posts, you will match up the red to the red and the black to the black. To attach the speaker wires, unscrew the connectors, take your wire and insert it into the small hole in the post. Twist to screw down the connector firmly, making sure you have a secure connection. Do the same with the other wire. Make sure you don't put the wire too far through the hole. Leaving wire exposed may eventually lead to a short. Try to have the copper part of the wire under the post and not sticking out of either end. The other side of the plate also has the binding post. You would attach the wires to this side the same way. These binding posts can also accept something called banana jacks. A banana jack is simply a plug that would fit down into the center of each binding post. Sometimes you may run into a screw-down keystone connector like this. You'll need a flathead small screwdriver. To attach the wires, you unscrew the small screws for each hole. Make sure the wires are twisted tight. Matching up the red to the red, the positive, and the black to the black, the negative, insert the wire inside the hole in the front. Then, while holding the wire in place, screw down the screws so that it pinches the wire inside, making the connection. Check to make sure it is connected securely, with no wire showing on the outside of the hole. If you have too much stripped and wire is exposed, it again could lead to a short. Once you finish one wire, do the same with the other wire. This is another example of a screw-down connector you may see with speaker wire. Just like the one we just showed you, with this type, you unscrew the terminal using your small screwdriver, insert the wire, and screw down the terminal again. That's it! Now you know how to terminate speaker wire with binding posts or screw-down terminals. Finally, we're going to show you how to connect two wires to make one longer wire. We'll be using beanie or dolphin connectors to do this. You can use these with speaker wire or twisted pair cabling. For this video, we'll be using Cat5 wire to demonstrate. Match up the wires that you need to connect. In this case, he has two pieces of Cat5 wire, and we'll start by matching up the green wire on one to the green wire on the other. He will also show the white-green connecting to the white-green. Use either wire strippers or wire cutters to carefully trim off the sheathing. Matching the green to the green, twist the wires together. Do the same with the white-green and white-green. Now take the dolphin connector. Inside, it has little teeth that will grip the wire. Slip the dolphin connector over the twisted wires. Using a pair of crimpers, squeeze down on the dolphin connector. Be careful not to crimp down too tightly because if you squeeze too much, you can make the connector fall apart. Check to make sure it is crimped on securely without falling apart. That's it! Now you know how to connect two wires using dolphin or beanie connectors. That concludes all of our how-to videos for this tutorial. After watching this tutorial, you should now recognize the various cables you will see and use at Livewire, understand the rating system for cables, and know how to terminate many of those cables and add connectors. Remember, in addition to knowing how to do these things, you will also need to demonstrate your ability to do these things as well. So make sure you take the time to practice what you've learned.